Hey, what's up guys? So I'm up here in the canyons again today, and I've got my buddy Matt with me. And as you can see, this is its 1985 Corolla GT-S, also known as the AE86 or Hachiroku in Japanese. Now, if you don't know what this car is, I suggest you pause this video, go watch all 83 episodes of Initial D, then come back and watch the rest of this video. Otherwise, you won't understand just how special it is. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Do you want to say a few things about the car first?
Oh yeah, sure. So I bought the car actually in LA, and I flew to LA and I drove it up the Pacific Coast Highway, you know, just have some fun with it. And I've had it for a little over a couple of years. I actually blew the head gasket on the original 4A, and I had someone swap in a 20 valve for me. So shout out to Sue at Aggressive Performance for doing that. He did an awesome job. Yeah, so now that I have the 20 valve in there, which is a crazy fun engine.
Yeah, so tell me more about the 20 valve. It's still got the same 4AG engine code as the original engine, but it has 20 valves instead of 16, right?
Right, that's correct. So, I mean, that's like the main difference between the two platforms is, I mean, it still has the 4A code, but the additional valve in each cylinder is exactly what you get. That is different. Right,
so it's still a 1.6 liter naturally aspirated, just like the original engine.
Right.
But I think this one, supposedly Toyota rates it at like 160 horsepower versus the 112 of the 16 valve.
Right.
But I think you dynoed this car, right? And it was outputting.
Yeah, so I dynoed it. My buddy who put the engine in, we dynoed it at his place, and it only gets 108 to the wheel. So everything on the forums. No, I've actually dynoed it. He did a great job. It's a very clean motor. Yeah, 108 to the wheels is all you get.
Okay, so that's probably like, what, 135, 140 at most to the crank?
Correct. Yeah. So it's not near the 165 that everyone claims.
But it's still a lot more than the 80 wheel horsepower that you get with the stock engine.
Oh
right?
yeah, over the 4A, it's night and day.
Yeah.
You know, or just over the 16 valve, it's night and day, and it's a blast. And it revs to 8,200.
That's insane.
Red line, which is over the 7,500 in the 16 valve. So it's a blast to just get up there, and I'm, you know, running ITV, so it's extremely loud. I have the Megan race coils. Nothing special there. I have fake work equips.
Nice.
The DR20s, but I have Drezza 2s on there. So.
Okay, so really sticky tires.
Yeah, great sticky tires. So. Yeah, it's been a great car. I've tracked it twice at Laguna, and it's been really fun. Also, I installed an HKS high power exhaust, and it makes it a lot louder.
Big old fart cannon.
Pretty big fart cannon, I must say. Yeah, it's good fun. It's good fun.
All right. Well, really looking forward to this drive. I mean, there's a whole backstory behind this car and how Matt acquired it. But I won't go too much into that. Let's just hop in and take it for a drive. Oh no. Park. Yes. Alright, so first things first, the driver controls and the seating position. The controls are surprisingly light for almost a 30-year-old car. This does have hydraulic power assisted steering, and actually it feels like one of the best, most communicative, most usable steering racks I've ever used. I actually like it better than my NSX steering rack, just because it combines lightness with feedback, and that's not something I've really felt before, except maybe in like the BRZ. So you can still feel what the front axle is doing, but at the same time you can just steer it with one hand with no problem. The shifter is extremely light as well. The throws are a little bit longer than I would prefer, but that actually makes it a lot more difficult to miss gears, so it works really well. It's similar to kind of the 90s, early 2000s Honda shifters. And same with the pedals. They're placed really well for heel toe, very close together. And the pedals themselves feel very small, so it's very easy to kind of put your foot on the brake and the gas at the same time for heel towing. terms of the seating position, this car is lowered, so it does feel pretty low. But at the same time, the seat itself is extremely comfortable. It's almost like sitting on a one-seater couch. But that's not to say that it doesn't hold you well in the corners, because it has these adjustable side bolsters, which actually you can adjust it to fit the width of your body. And right now it's set perfectly, so I'm not moving around really at all in the corners. But it's still extremely soft and very forgiving. So before we start going a little faster here, Matt, why did you originally buy this 86, and what other cars were you considering at the time?
Well, originally, before I even bought this car, I had a Toyota MR2, just NA.
3rd gen one, right?
3rd gen, yeah, correct. SW20, and I really like that car, but you know, I've always in the back of my mind, like any, I guess, initial D fan, you know, wants an 86, you know, so.
The MR2 lost to the 86 in initial E, so there you go.
Yeah, there you go. I guess the reason why I wanted it so bad was because I know I had the opportunity. I knew a friend of mine had a friend who, you know, probably needed some money, and it was a really clean one. This one's like really clean. The interior's, you know, spotless, and just the fact that I knew I had the opportunity, it's always, you know, a car that I wanted. You know, I didn't want to like garage clean it. You know, I wanted to track it. Really wanted to enjoy it, and so that's where it is right now. Right now I can daily it too. It's really fun, and it's been a great car ever since.
Yeah. So what were some of the other cars you're considering, if any, at the time?
So I mean, given my budget, I was looking at an MR2, MRS, Miata, you know, those kind of roadster cars.
So the typical like lightweight 90s, early 2000s like Japanese sports cars, right?
Right, you know, rear-wheel drive was what I was looking for. And you know, the MR2 was just a great condition car, so that's the first car that I bought. But then I sold it shortly after when I had the opportunity to buy this, and now I have this car, and it's been a blast.
So in terms of performance figures, this car, like I mentioned earlier, puts down about 112 or 108 horsepower, right, to the rear wheels?
To the wheels, yes.
And torque is probably in like maybe the 70s to 80s to the wheels in terms of foot-pounds.
That's in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like mid-80s.
So it's a very low torque engine. You really got to rev it between like 5 and 8 grand to get the best power out of it.
Right, that's on the VVT system.
Right. So VVT is Toyota's variable valve timing. So it's kind of like their equivalent of Honda's VTEC, but it's not as advanced as VTEC. It doesn't have, I don't believe it has a physical separate cam profile to it.
Correct.
So it doesn't like kick you in the butt as hard as a traditional VTEC system would. But in a minute you'll see when I rev it kind of above 4,000 to 5,000, you can still hear that little crossover. And this car only weighs, I think, around 2,200 to 2,400 pounds,
Correct.
depending on the trim.
Yeah.
So out of all the cars I've driven so far, this is by far the lightest. It's about as light as a Miata, but it has a little bit more power than the 1st gen Miata. And it revs a lot higher, sounds a lot better. In my opinion, it has more of a kind of cool rarity factor to it, for sure. But with initial D, and if you know Keiji Tsuchiya, the Drift King, you know, he grew up drifting these cars and racing these cars in the 90s. So it's really iconic. But what I've never driven this car hard in canyons before, so what I'm really curious to find out is to see how it handles in the corners, and if it really feels like a 30-year-old car, or if it's still really fun to drive. If I had to guess the 0 to 60 time of this car, I would guess if you did a proper launch, which I'm not going to do today, you could probably get it in like the low to mid 7-second range, just because it's so light.
We'll see. I'm in the car though, so.
Well, either way, let me just do a really quick rolling start, 0 to 60, and show you guys what this engine feels like. feels just like, you know, 2,300 pounds in that vicinity. Feels lighter than any car I've driven. Maybe it feels a little bit lighter than the S2000 even. And obviously it is like 500 pounds lighter than that car. But just the way this car turns in, it's very immediate, very direct. There's not really a hint of understeer at all. And it's got a lot of grip with these Dureza 2 tires.
The braking is a lot better now since the steel lines that I put in.
Alright, so you put in, what brand?
Goodline or Goodrich?
Goodrich, right?
Yeah,
Stainless steel lines.
Yeah.
And you have the hog pads on here too, right?
Yeah, the HB Plus.
Okay, so there's like the more track-focused ones.
Right.
They squeak a little bit when you're just driving around, right?
Definitely. And there's definitely brake dust, so.
Oh yeah. But the initial bite is actually really surprisingly good for a 30-year-old car. You know?
Right. As soon as I put those in, it was 9K difference.
Yeah.
Anyone who owns an older car, if you can upgrade anything, brakes-wise, you definitely get steel lines. Like,
yeah, steel lines, good pads, fresh rotors, and then .4 brake fluid.
Yep.
Engine response feels a lot like a Honda. You have to rev it kind of in the 5,000 to 8,000 RPM range to get good power out of it. And if you fall below that, the engine will just chug really hard. It feels like 10 foot-pounds of torque at 2,000 RPMs.
Going uphill, if you're not in the right gear, you're chugging.
Yeah, so this is definitely a momentum car. It's not something that's going to blow hardly any modern car out of the water in terms of straight line performance. But like on the downhill and in the corners, you can really just feel the grip. And on top of all that, the engine sounds glorious. It sounds like a VTEC, except it has a little bit of a different kind of tone to it. It's a little bit different from the Hondas that I've driven, but it's the way it revs just still sounds like a VTEC.
Yeah, it's a blast, man. Like, that's why I was thinking about putting a 480 GZE.
Oh, the supercharged version,
the
right?
supercharged version of the 16 valve. And you know, the person I was talking to about the swap, he's like, yeah, it's gonna be super fun. You know, like it's really punchy in the low gear or the low RPM. I was just like, oh, I kind of want something that's track, you know, more track oriented.
Right, where the power is all the way at the top, because that's, you know, that's where you keep the RPMs when you're on the track, right?
Yeah.
It's at the very top.
So I really have enjoyed having the 20 valve, and nothing gets like the revving to over 8K never gets old. You know?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure any like S2000 guy could say the same, you know.
Oh, for sure. Like, you know, having owned an S2000 and the EM1 Civic SI, 8,200 RPM redline on both of those cars, and then my NSX, which has an 8,000 RPM redline, it's just like almost intoxicating when you rev it that high. As much as I appreciate and respect like big V8s that have, you know, 400 foot-pounds of torque, it's just not the same, because it feels like you're not working as hard to get that performance out of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it requires a little more skill, and you have to keep the RPMs high. So when you're downshifting in it, you gotta, you know, properly keep everything in the power band. It adds an element to it.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. Yeah, that's a good point, because I know some people who drive like Corvettes and Mustangs on the track. I've watched some videos of them on the track, and it's just like they don't even shift at redline. They can just shift 1,000, even 2,000 RPMs before redline, and the acceleration is practically the same as if they just shifted up at redline, just because the torque band is so linear. And while that's like really fun in its own way, and you know, you can do really cool burnouts, and it's really good for daily driving, I mean, just my personal preference, and obviously your personal preference, is just to have the lower torque, you know, higher RPM, naturally aspirated engines. And even the stock 4AGE, the 16 valve in this car, that one was still just in terms of comparisons of this car to other cars, I try to include some of those in every review for, you know, potential shoppers for this car, but it's really hard to kind of place where this car is, because they're so hard to find in good condition, and the prices are all over the board. You can probably find one on Craigslist that's beat up, has 200,000 miles, a bunch of, you know, weird mods to it, for maybe 3 or 4 grand. But, you know, do you really want to spend 3 or 4 grand on a car that's, you know, that's been abused for 30 years? But then on the flip side of it, just a few days ago, I saw a really pristine USDM AE86 with 93,000 original miles, and it had some mods on it, so it wasn't completely stock, but, you know, the owner obviously took good care of it, and put tasteful mods on it. It had the original 4AG engine, and she was asking 35 grand for that thing. And that just like blows my mind. So like, my point of all this is that if you're looking to shop for this car, you definitely need to understand that there's a lot of variability in the condition and price. This particular car is definitely like one of the best condition 86s you can find out there. So, you know, just take it with a grain of salt. If you want something reliable and maintenance free, maybe look at a Miata instead of this thing. It's newer, you can find parts for it very easily. It's, you know, everyone has one. There's a lot of mods out there for it. This car is a little bit harder to find mods, and there's not as much of a, I guess, support, just like aftermarket support for it. So if you're into that thing and you want like a really cool, iconic, like Japanese classic, it's one of the most, you know, iconic cars out there. But just be aware that, you know, it's a 30-year-old car, and it does come with the typical issues of a 30-year-old car.
You definitely have to put money into it. And I mean, it's not a cheap car. If you're just looking to buy something that will be easy on maintenance, easy on your wallet, then this probably is not the car for you.
Right, absolutely.
I completely agree where like a Miata would be a better choice.
Yeah, and your like old housemate just bought a Miata after, you know, you kind of recommended it to him. Right?
Yeah, and I had the chance to drive that, and the shifting is great. You know, the feel is great. It's just kind of slower, and I would say the grip-wise is
pretty similar,
on par. You know.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised you think like how this one handles, because a lot of people, they say the 86, you know, a lot of it is a lot of hype, and some people just don't think it driving wise it lives up to it. But, you know, I feel like for me it's good enough, and it's definitely been super fun. Handling wise, it's great. You know, so
yeah, and I think you put the right mods on here in terms of like order of priority. You know, you upgraded the brakes, you put some fresh rotors on it, good pads and fluid on brake lines, and then obviously you did the coilovers, which reduced the body roll by a lot, which is one thing that the stock car has a lot of, is a lot of body roll. Right. This car has almost no body roll now. And obviously now you have enough power with it, with the 20 valve. So right. I mean, next things you could probably do to it, or maybe put an LSD on it, because I know this car has an open diff in the back.
Right, yeah.
So it's not the easiest thing to oversteer or hold an oversteer with. But I mean, you're not a drifter anyway, so it's not really that big a problem.
Yeah, mostly track.
But otherwise, this car, I mean, it feels awesome. Out of all the cars that I've driven so far, I'd put this, in terms of fun to drive, I'd put it on par with the S2000. It feels kind of like an older, slower version of the S2000 in some ways. So yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. As always, if you have any feedback, comments, suggestions, you know, just leave it in the comment section.